Good evening and welcome to the September 7th, 2021 Shakopee Public Utilities Commission meeting. This meeting is being held at the SPU Service Center, and we ask that all participants mute your devices at this time. The public is welcome, and we have an open time slot for the public to address the commission. Ms. Nelson, would you please call the roll?
President Mokel.
Aye. Are here.
Vice President Fox.
I hear too.
Commissioner Brennan.
Here.
Commissioner Krieg.
Here.
Commissioner Letourneau.
Here.
All 5 commissioners are present. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2 is communications. Does any of the commissioners have anything they received or heard that they wish to share with the commission? If not, we will go on to number 3. Any communications to share? All right. On to item number 3, the consent agenda. We also have a couple of agenda items for 3B that I would like to either move or add. The first one is number 10C, to move to after the public comment before the general manager's report, as Jody needs to leave for her council meeting. And then another one that we would like to add is to 9A, a discussion on COVID and the changing situation as it goes on there. So if I could get either an approval or an amendment to the agenda. Does anybody else have any more additions or corrections?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
And I will second that.
All right. I have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. All right. Now on to number 4, which is our liaison report. Ms. Brennan, do you have anything to share with us tonight?
I really don't have anything tonight, so
All
no.
right. Okay. Well, thank you. Number 5 is our public comment period. The public comment period provides an opportunity for the public to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda. Comments should not exceed 5 minutes. As president, I may adjust the time limit based upon the number of persons seeking to comment. This comment period may not be used to make personal attacks, to air personality grievances, or for political endorsements or campaigns. The public comments are intended for informational purposes only. Commissioners will not enter into a dialogue with commenters, and questions from commissioners will be for clarification only. Does anybody want to speak? Seeing none, we will move on to 10C, our discussion on the classification and compensation study. Mr. Dren.
Thank you. And Commissioners, we're here today with our compensation and classification study that we discussed back in December 7th, I believe, and prior to that, in November, the compensation study, which we thought we needed to update some job descriptions and revisit the topic. So, at our December 7th meeting, we did chose to freeze the manager's wages. We gave a 2.5% COLA increase for 2021 to the rest of the employees. And then I said within the third quarter of 2021 that we would have a compensation study done for hopefully an adoption in our 2022 budget. Part of that was the organizational structure was reviewed, and we looked at that, and that was approved at our April 5th meeting. We were approved a different organizational structure. After that, then we got busy working on other stuff. This was no light task, to say the least. I mean, this was very intense that we had to really dig into our organization and dive into job descriptions and questionnaires. As talked about in here, just because something's in a job description, we wanted to understand is, are the employees doing all those things, or is something shifted? So we did a questionnaire to all our employees, and then our managers were able to review them and say, is that allocated? Should there be a shift in responsibility? So we kind of really got an understanding to make sure that people were doing the things that were in their job descriptions, and some of these job descriptions were 10 plus years old, so it really hasn't been revisited in quite some time. So Deborah helped us with that process, and then after that, we really, Deborah took the reins, and then her and I worked on some stuff with Comp Analyst. We purchased some data, so we understood where we are in the compensation. We did an internal equity, which you'll see in this report. And then also, I asked Deborah, actually even today, she just modified just 2 slides, 2 or 3 slides that were talking about the process a little bit more, and she's able to log in and show the process so everybody understands the process that went through when picking some of these data points. So the process went well. Like I say, it's been a long time that we spent lots of hours on this, and really we got buy-in from our leadership team. So I didn't want to make all the decisions, and Deborah didn't want to make all the decisions, because we thought that it needed to be a buy-in as a team effort to say internally, what do we think is important? All jobs are important, but we had to rank them some way. So there's really a score sheet, which Deborah will go over a little bit more on internal equity. What's the responsibility? How can it affect the organizations? And then how does it appear to the public as well? So if a decision is made, what does it look like in the public? Will that get out? So those are all criteria that we used. And it was overall, I thought it was a very successful project that we were undertaking, and I'm very pleased with the compensation study. So Deborah's here, and she can talk a little bit more about that. She's got a presentation, and then ultimately we would like this kind of adopted as into the record that this is what's going to look like, pay per performance in 2022, but we'll get to that discussion at the end. So Deborah England from Deborah's firm, I always get this wrong, HR Expertise BP. So she's done this many, many times, small organizations, all the way up, she tells me, large organizations, 1,000 employees, all the way down to very small organizations. So really, she's done it across all spectrums. And I thought that was a great asset to understand what smaller organizations do, what mid-size do, and what large companies do. So both from investor-owned to co-ops, to municipals, and then private industry all over the metro area. So with that, I'll let Deborah speak for a while, and then we can sure just have a dialogue about this in the process. So take it away, Deborah.
Thank you. Do I have to push anything on this microphone, Ms.
No,
Denise?
they're on.
Oh, good. Okay, so we decided after we talked, and then we talked with the leadership team, that we would do sort of the first part is sort of what is compensation design and what were we thinking when we did what we did. So I'm going to start with sort of fundamentals, and then I'll end with these are the decisions Shakopee made and how it will look for Shakopee. But we're going to start with just sort of a generic, kind of catch everybody up. So here we go. All right.
Give it just a minute and it'll come up.
Oh, all right. Well, mine isn't even moving. There we go. We're going to start out with what are the goals and challenges when you're designing a compensation plan? So initially, the compensation plan at its root purpose is to attract and retain talent. It's not a wealth builder. It's not whatever else people label pay plans to be. It's merely there to fairly reward people for the work that they do, that's true, but its primary responsibility is to attract and retain talent, those people who can do the job and do it well. Next, compensation that recognizes and rewards excellence. In other words, rewards people who perform well and doesn't reward those who don't perform as well. So when you set expectations, that is promoted and that is rewarded. You create a performance plan to go along with your compensation plan that promotes excellence in performance as well. So the two go hand in glove. They are not separate. Pay and performance in the manner that Shakopee chose to go forward with pay for performance are linked closely together. They're tied. The process that we followed is that we wanted to be the internal equity, meaning all jobs are evaluated based on what they are against a standard, not against each other, not apples and oranges. We wanted it to be compared against the standard factors, and I'll go through that a little bit later to show you what some of those were. But we wanted equitable in where we place jobs and what grade levels and how we rank them to be fair and equitable, both within a department, that makes sense, but also across the organization, so from department to department to department. So that was a part of the internal equity process. Part of this is there shouldn't be a need for a union if you do this right, because unions actually look at this kind of information, and I have some of my clients are unionized, but still follow this process, which is sort of contraindicated, but it actually does work, and they actually buy into it, because that's, at its core, it's equitable, it's fair. And it's a process that rewards or should reward employee engagement. It should reward people to do what they should do to the betterment of the organization, rather than what's just easiest for me to get by, right? So it promotes the right behaviors. It should promote excellence in performance. So when you take on all of that, where do you start? So we started with defining what's your total compensation strategy. That means, where do you want to pay against the marketplace? That's sort of the first question. Do you want pay for performance? Do you want it to be step systems, which is what more of what you had before? You had sort of a mix, but how do you want this to look? So you start with defining your compensation program and its philosophy. Next, you determine internal equity. That means the ranking of positions across the organization. How do they line up against a standard set of factors so that we can see where they should line up, as opposed to trying to compare a lineman with a customer service rep? That just doesn't, I mean, that's a challenge that's not winnable. Then you define the market for base pay. So you go out to the marketplace and you say, what do we pay? You know, what's the marketplace paying for these similar jobs? And then last, you define a performance measurement tool, a way of measuring performance that's fair and equitable and actually will work throughout the organization. So at the end of all of that, the goal is to have a cost-effective and a balanced pay plan, meaning it doesn't do us any good if we go out and we design something that we can't afford. That's ridiculous. So we look for, how can we be competitive in the talent market where we can attract people and we can also retain them once they arrive? So we need to keep our pay practices current, but also it would promote high performance. So expectations are high. If you want to be paid more, you have to perform high. You're just coasting, you're not going to make as much. That's how your pay plan is being designed. That's pay for performance. All right. So just as a sort of an outlier, an overview of what is cash compensation made up of, it's base pay, and then it's incentive pay. Incentives are bonuses, profit sharing plans, things like that. It does not include these other forms of compensation, long-term incentive plans, equity plans, which is stock shares, profit sharing plans that are not cash-based, perquisites, I get a car, you don't get a car, benefits, healthcare, dental, those types of things. Cash compensation is what we're going to focus on today, and that is made up of base pay and some incentive pay. And notice the incentive pay or the at-risk pay, meaning you have to earn it every year, over and over and over again, is a very small portion of the total. Any questions so far? All right. Okay, so what does compensation theory include? There's two parts to it. Obviously, base pay, it's your fixed rate of pay. It compounds year over year over year over year. You give someone an increase, that compounds against the next increase. So it's like compound interest, right? It's fixed. It doesn't go down. So you look at internal equity. How do you define job levels? If you've got grade levels, what grade level does each job fit in? That's internally determined based on the duties of the job. Then you have a policy where you're going to put your midpoints. So policy versus practice. Policy says our midpoints are going to be at market, or we're going to fall below market, or we're going to be target and pay 15% ahead of market. At least that's what they used to tout. So we put our salary ranges where we decide they should be against the marketplace. Practice is, where do you pay people? How wide are your salary ranges? Are they, what's most common is a 50% spread. That actually is 80% of midpoint to 120% of midpoint. Some companies dabbled with, well, let's do the 70 to 130% range. We've got a lot of people well paid, and we got a lot of people near the bottom that we don't want to, we want a really wide, they called it broad banding. Most common best practice is still the 80 to 120, 50% spread. Practice is your merit increases. How do you give raises to people, and what's it based on? Right? Incentive pay is the other side. That's the at-risk portion. It directly links most directly to performance. So the policy says it's the level of bonus you would get as an employee is largely based on the level of your job within the organization, and that's based on how much of an impact you have on the success of the organization. Everybody impacts the success of Shakopee Public Utilities. However, the general manager makes decisions that the people who are helping at the customer service level don't make. So if he screws up, God willing, it's a bigger impact than if one of your customer service people just misspoke something, and it's easy to go back and fix it and make somebody whole, right? So the level of impact of the position in the organization has a direct correlation to how big of an incentive payout you get. Practice is the payout must correlate to corporate performance. So if, for example, you have an incentive plan or a bonus program and the utility lost money that year, there will be no bonus program, right? There's just no payouts. If the company performs and does really, really well, there's a bonus pool that's maybe bigger, and people can get, a nice spiff for, hey, thanks for letting us get there. Best practices you create sort of target amounts for each position, and the best practice says that's a 50-50 proposition, whether you get that or you don't, every year. If it's higher than that, then somebody will say, well, that's a cakewalk, I'm always gonna get that. If it's less than that, then it's too high a stretch, and then people feel like they'll never get it, right? So it's a 50-50 probability. The performance of the company meets what the goals are, and your performance makes you eligible. Does that make sense? Any questions? I'm doing comp design in a hurry. All right, moving on. So it's a simple chart. The larger your impact on the organizational success, the higher the pay level. They tend to line up. It is not, however, a straight line, but it's easier to depict it that way, right? Okay. So how do we differentiate job levels? There are key factors that in the marketplace they call this, or in compensation world, they call it job evaluation, meaning you look at the job, not the person. So we create job descriptions, or in our case, the job descriptions didn't have enough information in them, so we had people fill out what are called position questionnaires that talk about these things: breadth of accountability, what's their freedom to act, what can they do without, what decisions can they make without going back to their supervisor to get permission ahead of time. What kind of financial impact would an error be if they did an oops? What is it recoverable? Is it not recoverable? Also what kind of disruption will it create in the community or within your customer base? And then lastly, of course, the standard knowledge, skills, and abilities required to perform the job. So I'm going to show you the tool we used. This tool is designed around utilities, right? It's a standard tool that's been created cross industries, cross positions, so it will work cross positions, but this one has been tempered and tailored with some extra little notes in there for utility-specific entities. So our first factor is education and training. What's required of the job?
Are you showing us?
I am. I moved it. Oh. Okay. I don't know how to make this show up. Is Bob around?
Bob?
I don't know how to make it. It's a link, but maybe the link isn't showing. How do I make a link show? Up. It's a link off the presentation. So how do I make this show up?
In the wireless?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's on my computer, but,
Where's the link in here?
oh, it's in the presentation down there. Do we need to exit? It's not even moving.
No.
Let's do this. I tested this before. See if I could go back and forth.
That's
I'll
the
let
way-
the
that's the way-
man do the
That's the
thing.
way it always works. Do you have your mouse?
No,
Okay,
my bad.
all right.
I didn't bring it. This is also a mouse.
Yeah.
Are we locked up?
You are locked up.
I am. I'm gonna do Control Alt Delete and boot it back up.
You can, or I can see if I can grab a mouse really quick, if we can get around that real quick.
All right. My apologies. We'll wait for him to get a mouse. My apologies. We tested this too. Just before the start of the meeting, we tested it. So, went in and out, didn't have a problem.
Does anybody have any questions for Deb at this point?
So why don't I explain how this works, this job evaluation system works. It's made of 8 factors. So just in case we can't pull it up and look at it. Within those 8 factors, education and training is one. So we look at it to say, this is the factor, here's what's required to get the job, right, to perform the job. Then, what we do is there's levels within each factor. So from minimal work, education training required to the PhD, for example. So each level then has,
There we go.
click right on that, just, yeah, there you go. Oh, thank you. Can you see it?
No.
They still can't see it.
That's where we're at.
Yep.
Is right there. Is that
So
one thing?
within each level, there's points assigned at each level, right? So it's called a point factor system. So we have a descriptor at each level that describes what jobs best fit at each level. And then we choose as we're going through, but the leadership team chose without the points in the tool. This tool, if he gets it up, shows the points in the tool. They just chose level. They just said, this job, as we describe it, we go through each factor, what level fits, and that's what they chose. Not knowing how the points were gonna work and, and each factor is weighted. They also didn't know that. They just knew, pick a level, make it work, right? And there was debate amongst the leadership team as to what level each job fell in for each factor. If we can't make it work, it's okay.
Yeah.
When you get all done, in the background, obviously, I know all the points assigned to the level, and we've got it sorted and it's consistent. That creates a total number of points. Those points then are ranked from small to large. And how do they all line up and fit together? So, when we do that, now we've got everybody ranked from low to high. The next step you do is you take a look at how do you want to group them into salary ranges, and you do a 15% spread. Just noticeable difference in the world of statistics is 15%. So therefore, from one midpoint to the next is a 15% spread. Does that make sense? In points. So, what are you looking for?
Your link that's in here.
Oh, go up. Here, I'll show you.
Just not launching from your.
There we go. So that's how we create our grade levels. So we take all the points and we figure it out. We divide by 15%. How many grade levels does that make? In your case, it was 14. That is actually the magic number we shoot for, between 14 and 16 grade levels. That for an organization your size is the norm. Does that make sense? So I'm going to, since you can't see it, I will simply go through and tell you what each of so the first one is education and training. The next factor is work experience, and it goes from 1 month, up to a month of prior experience doing whatever, to you need 10 or more years of progressively responsible experience in that role or a similar role. So in the case for your CEO or your general manager, they have to have, they would get the 10 or more progressively. So the next category or the next factor is analytical and problem-solving skills. So we look at what kind of analysis work is done on a regular basis in that job, or what type of problem-solving are they doing. Everybody in every job does some type of analysis. They also do some type of problem-solving, right? So we look at it, we break it out again in levels, and we look at which fits where. It's a dual. So they could go up because they do more complex analysis, or they could go up because their problem solving is more challenging. Either one can move them up through the levels. But we look for what makes the most sense. Right. So factor 4 is level of discretion and accountability. It's like an L. It has 2 scales. One is impact of error, and it goes from minor to significant. The other is a level of discretion, which means they're following very specific directions. They don't have a lot of freedom to act. If they're going to do something differently, they're going to ask their supervisor, right? So if I am someone who has very specific tasks and I do them in the same way each time, I'm going to be much lower. The impact of error that I might make, that is likely to be minor as well. And so they're going to have the lowest number of scores. And as you go out on impact of error and go up on discretion, the points go up too. Does that make sense to everybody? The next factor is factor 5. It's contacts and communication with others. There's again 2 axes for this. Level of a degree of contact. Who do you talk to and how often do you talk to them? Are you someone who is literally, you do your job, you may talk to your coworkers or your supervisor, but you're not really talking to anybody else. You're not part of a project team. You tend to work independently, kind of by yourself. Or the other axis says what interpersonal skills are required. And it goes from, I need to be able to greet someone with courtesy, and if I'm on the phone or I'm in person, give them directions. Right? It's a passing of information that's very concrete, all the way up to I'm negotiating large contracts. And I need to have quite good skills to pull that off, right? So they were going to go along each axis, and you find where the 2 meet, and in that box is a point score again. Next one is factor 6. This one applies only to a few of our jobs. It's scope of supervision or work direction. So the one axis is what's the size of the group that you either give work direction to or you supervise. And work direction is in the lower end, and then when it switches from work direction to supervision. So when you go from a lead who doesn't have supervisory responsibility but gives work direction to a frontline supervisor who's now responsible for everybody's performance and giving performance reviews, it starts over a little bit on the one anchor. It starts with, you have 0 people that report to you or you give work direction to, all the way up to an entire division within the organization. On the other axes, it's the complexity of the work that you oversee or give direction over or regarding. So the work is not very complex, it's very straightforward, all the way up to, it's very complex, it's a high level, it would be Greg giving work direction or supervising Joe Adams, right? Or Brad, or Sharon, or Lon, right? So it has a sliding scale. And then the next factor 7, we have 8, is policies and procedures. It's a singular. Do you merely follow them, or do you make and create procedures for your own self or for your department, all the way up to you create policy for the entire organization, thus the leadership team. They create policy that affects everyone in the organization, or they can, right? The last factor we have is mental effort and physical risk. This is also a kind of a funny one. It starts in the middle and you go up or you go down. So if you're in an office job and you work kind of off in the corner by yourself and nobody bugs you, and you can concentrate, doesn't matter what you're working on, whether it's highly complex or not complex, if nobody bothers you and you have undivided attention to that task, and there's no physical risk involved, that's going to get a lower score because there's fewer interruptions, unless the job requires a high level of mental anxiety that goes along with it, right? You're doing some analysis that's so painful that by the end of the day, you're exhausted, right? And you do it all day. The flip side of that is someone who is constantly interrupted. They're working on a project, and every time they get interrupted, they have to go back to the beginning and start that project over again practically, because it's challenging. Or they just simply have to keep track of 1,000 things. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but it's a challenge, right? They're in the middle of a room with lots of noise, and there's people coming and going, and they're expected to do an analysis that's challenging. Or talk on the phone and explain something to someone who just doesn't get it, right? That's a challenge. So it's going to be, you're going to get a higher score for that. If you are someone in the field who is, yes, you may be outside, you may be in the field, but there's not significant physical risk to you, other than there's a snowstorm or a windstorm or, something of that nature. I suppose you could get into a car accident, right, if you're driving from one place to another, versus someone who is putting their life on the line every day, right? They're working with a live wire, they're down in working with chemicals that could hurt them or cause severe physical damage. They're going to get a higher score for that. So this is our leveling factor that allows us to give the credit to those who are doing tasks and work that is in a challenging environment, right? I'm in the middle of the room, people are interrupting me constantly, or I'm risking my physical safety. Those are our 8 factors that we talk about. All of them fit within these skills that I have highlighted in one way or another. Any questions? It was not easy to do. We had some challenging conversations about it, and we went back and reviewed them a couple times, some of them, that we just weren't sure. So at the end of the day, when we ranked them all, we went back and we looked at, does it make sense how they laid out within their own department? And does it make sense then when you look across the organization, right? We didn't want the I don't want to pick on member service people or the customer service people, but we don't want the customer service person at the same level that we would put a Joe Adams, as an example, or a Sharon, right? But you want to make sure that they do land where they deserve to land, the position deserves to be. So that's the internal equity piece of it. That stays. It doesn't change. It doesn't change unless the job changes. So it's a fixed point of reference. Okay. Next piece is you want to look at the marketplace. And so when we go out to look at market data, we're looking at comparable companies. So we want to look at geography. What do we want to compare against? Obviously, we're in Minnesota. Why would we compare against California? Or why would we look at just national average or that type of thing? If we're in Shakopee, does it make sense for us to compare against Brainerd, Minnesota, for example? So we have to sort that out. What's the best comparison for us to compare against? Then we look at industry. There's the utility energy sector utilities. Then there's IOUs. They group them into transmission or power production, transmitting, and then distribution. You're at the distribution part of it. But that doesn't account for, that's electric only, that doesn't account for water, and for some of our small cities, they also have gas, right? So then there's another grouping that's just utilities. It's any combination thereof. There's actually one that's just water and gas alone and no electric. And so we chose the utility industry, which would include at least one other industry besides electric. Then you look at size. So how big are they? If it's a really, really tiny location and they have 14 people, they're not a comparable size to Shakopee with, and I never get the number right, 69?
54, 55
54.
employees.
Okay, whatever. I never get it right. I got it right the day I was doing it, and that was good enough. But, so we want to compare comparable sizes. So we look at both numbers of employees, but we look predominantly at revenue. But when you're talking about a utility, revenue is inflated because of your power cost is a pass-through. Does that make sense to you? So what you're charged by the power producer that you pass on to your customer is not true revenue, it's a pass-through. So in surveys, when we do utilities, I use net revenues, meaning take the power cost impact out of it as much as we can. And that's the revenue number I compare against other utilities. That's sort of standard practice. So we did indeed look at both size based on employee count and revenue, net, sort of pretend net revenue. Net revenue less power cost. It does not take into account things like ownership, tax status, nonprofit, for-profit. The marketplace, truthfully, doesn't make that call. An individual employer may say, we're a nonprofit and we're going to pay 20% below the market, and that's okay, but market is still market, right? So the next thing is we compare comparable roles. We are going to compare Lon's role to other water soups. We're going to take Brad's role, and we're going to compare against other electric soups, right? The general manager role is a little unique in that we don't compare it against CEOs, we compare it against COOs. And the reason for that in municipalities and in co-ops is because you have a commission or you have a board that are very actively engaged in leading the organization. And so it's better that we choose one level down. So we choose to compare and match at the COO level. So, any questions? The underlying question that we try to get to is, where do you get your talent from? Because that's who you need to compete against. Right? So if you get your talent, if your talent's being stolen away by Xcel Energy, which many of the utilities are finding Xcel has beefed up their base pay a little bit, although their benefits aren't as good, just to get these people, right? So you've got people who are competing actively against you out in the marketplace for your talent. And so you got to know what they're paying. You got to know what the market pay is so that you can be fair, right? And you have a chance of keeping your people, hopefully. Any questions so far on this? No? All right. I had 2 links. I don't think you're going to be able to see them, but we'll give it a go. I pulled up the link for Greg's job. Yes, it won't pull up.
It
It did pull up.
Did it? It's just slow.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
When you
I
moved it.
apologize. I did that to it. Okay, let's exit out of this. Did it come? Come on. Yeah. Okay. I have to turn my back on the camera. I apologize. I need to go up to view. Oh, well, we're not going to worry about it. All right. So as you can see, this is what a sample report would look like for Greg's job. Right? So I need to go back up here because it's not showing it to me on mine. We have the different breakouts along the left. What's the average pay for base? Then comes total comp, that's including bonuses. Then it gives you target bonuses, not necessarily what they got, but what they should have gotten if everything, all measures were good at the 50-50 mark. And then that's salary ranges, minimum, midpoint, and maximum. So, if I could get the darn thing to slide down, maybe I can if I go this way. Let's see. Give me a second, I'll go back to it. Let's see if we can find it. No, it doesn't want to.
Hang on. You're running dual screen, that's what you're doing.
Well, you can take it out of there.
Yeah.
I want to be able to show them the whole thing.
Now that I know what it's doing.
Thank you for figuring it out.
Well, get done first.
He's a genius.
Where's the view?
And then you can click out of it there, I think.
Yeah. It's not in there now. We have to launch it first. Yeah. Okay, when you launch it. Hang on a second here.
Yeah, just go right down
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Speed ahead, zoom.
Yeah, hang on a second now.
I promise we'll get done in time for you to make the council meeting. This is why I don't do what he does.
Hang on a second here.
Doesn't like you. Doesn't like me either.
What about just throwing it into clone mode?
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Oh, Windows P should be the keyboard shortcut.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That should pop up on the side. There it is.
We're probably launching it before, but it was going to the duplicate screen.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Okay, so we'll slide ourselves down here to where it is. Okay. Oh, that's right, you have to do it this way now. There we go. Can y'all see it? Oh, look at you. Okay, and we can move. Okay. So we matched the jobs in any job, and this is straight out of Comp Analyst, which is the database that we're using. It's actually a compilation of many, many surveys. So Comp Analyst, Salary.com and Comp Analyst merged a couple years ago. Gave us all a bunch of headaches, but nonetheless, it also meant that every data, a lot of the surveys that the two did independently went into one database. So now it doesn't matter what you search on, the data's there. It doesn't, you don't have to go buy this survey and buy that survey. You can buy one database and get it, and get whatever you need. So as you look down, I can scroll down and I can see all the different ways I want to look at the data. So I looked at Midwest, I looked at Minnesota only, right? I looked at given cities, I looked at St. Cloud, and then Minnesota is the one that was the best match. And you can see I highlighted it for you. That's the number we chose to use because it was the best, it was sort of the middle data point. So I pull out different data points. If I looked at your actual revenue, it would be this number, the 268.3. That's your real revenue number, net revenue number, after you take power cost out. For the leadership team, we use this number. You were just past the 10 million number. So when I'm that close, I have the choice. I can go up or I can go down. And I choose to go down in this case, just to be more conservative. So then when we look at numbers of employees, right, for utilities, this is the number, it's higher again. So we chose, and Greg and I talked about this, we chose which number do we actually choose, which breakout do we want to use, and we chose one that was the most conservative. So as you can look down, you were to look at all of them, you know, some of these numbers go as high as the 400s, 500,000s, which would be not reasonable in your world, right? So this is the number we chose to use as his market data point. Now, that doesn't mean that's his midpoint, that's just the market data point. Anybody want to look at anything else? It's many pages long. Okay, so we're going to exit this. So this is the organization that we use. I'm not going to take you out there and have you run through a whole bunch of it, but if you're interested in seeing what it looks like and how it works, I can show it to you. You guys have to tell me if you want to take the time, otherwise we'll move on.
Anyone?
Anyone have a big urge to see it? No? All right, well then we're not going to do it. All right, keep moving. Okay, now we'll pop back up. Come on. All right, here we go. Okay, next. So here's a sample policy when you want to have a pay-for-performance program. So the total comp philosophy would be base pay. You have grade levels. You have midpoints that you place at the 50th percentile of the market or the average, either one. It's sort of depends on what the data looks like. If they're very far apart, you know, the 50th percentile is very different than the average, then you look at the data spread to see what's causing it and which one is the more reliable data point for the middle. You adjust your salary ranges after you create them biannually at minimum. In other words, you go out and you look at the marketplace and you rerun your analysis to see what it should look like every other year. You don't need to do it every year. It's kind of unnecessary. The market doesn't move that much, although no guarantees this year. Next year might be kind of crazy. But it hasn't been that volatile for 10 years, so we now have adjusted to biannual. And then you have individual performance-based increases. You get your increases based on where are you in your salary range and your level of performance. Okay? We're not going to go through incentive pay here. I think that's not the point of our conversation today, so since we're taking a while, we'll skip this. Here's a sample salary range, 80 to 120. So you start by defining the midpoint, and then you just go down 80% of it and go up 120% of it. Make sense? And by the way, if you take the gap, it's 80. It's about, you know, the math does work out to be 50%. Everybody gets lost with that too. Here's a merit increase grid. This is the guide that goes into place as an example for a pay-for-performance system. So you pick your target row, which is your philosophy. Where do you want to pay against the marketplace? And that's the row that you highlight. That's what you see in red. So the bottom is 80, the top is 120. And depending upon where your performance level is, and we just used a 1 to 5 scale as the example here. If you're a 1 or 2 performer, you're not meeting expectations at all, you're probably not going to get anything. But if you're at least at the 3, which is you are consistently meet and sometimes exceed standard or expectations, then you're going to get a raise. If you're hired in and you started out really, really low in your salary range, 80%, if you think about that for a minute, is 20% below market pay. That's pretty low. So you're going to have a hard time recruiting anybody at that level, but just in case you promote somebody up and they're going from a low position, they just got qualified for a much higher level job, and you know, you don't want to blow the doors off, you want to kind of do a gradual change, well, you might bring them in low in their range. Otherwise, you're going to bring them in, and your program is going to try to promote that people stay within the red boxes. That's the goal, right? So if the midpoint moves every year with the marketplace, you're getting a raise every year. It's just, you're not blowing out the top. So the goal now is no longer to get to the top of your salary range. The goal is to get to your midpoint. So now our target number is different. And that's going to be a little confusing when we do the transition here, because people are used to saying, well, you just get a raise until you hit the max, and then you're frozen. But now it's, no, we're hoping to get you here, and that's where we'll keep you, if we can. Okay, we're not going to go through the corporate scorecard. So how does Shakopee make this work? So here was our process. We defined the philosophy first. We updated all the job descriptions to match the new org chart that you approved. Plus, some of them, he's right, they were very old and they were not accurate. And so they were significantly updated, some of them. Then we did the internal equity. We every job went through the job evaluation system, and levels were assigned by the leadership team. And then in the background, we created the points and then laid them all out. So we did a check again, just as a reminder. Does it make sense? Is a lead lower than a supervisor, lower than the superintendent, right? Does that make sense? And then also, you know, it's particularly at the management level, when we look across the organization, does it make sense in how the managers line up in relative to each other in their roles? Grade levels are defined. So we've got the right job evaluation points assigned to each job. We figure out what grade levels we're going to have. In this case, you have 14. Then we go out, we check the market for each and every benchmark job. We don't have to match every job, which is why you do a point factor comparison, you do job evaluation, because you don't have to match every job. You match the majority. In our case, we matched most of them, almost all of them. But if you can't match every job, you pick your benchmark jobs that aren't volatile and aren't constantly changing dramatically year over year. And then you do what's called a regression analysis or a line of best fit. So you take the midpoint of the grade of the job evaluation points for the grade that that job lands in, the market data, right? So at the end of the day, well, you take the job evaluation points, you take the job data, market data, and you do a regression, and it spits out a formula. That formula then, all it needs to have in the formula is the middle point of job evaluation points for each grade level, gets slotted into that, and it gives us the midpoint out the back end, based on how everything spread and how everything lined up against the marketplace, internally and externally. So it blends the two together. So your salary ranges are now defined. You have your midpoints, it's simple math to do the bottom and the top. You create your increase grid, right? And they used the increase grid that I showed you. And then next steps for Shakopee is to define the performance feedback process and tool, because it needs to be updated too. And we just, first things first, get the comp plan sorted, worry about the performance tool second. Okay, so what's your philosophy? Base pay, you have 14 grade levels. You have midpoints set at average, weighted average, or 50th percentile. Again, you have to look at that for each job, because sometimes the 50th percentile is way off, and sometimes there's a really big dollar number out there that skews the whole thing on weighted average, so you have to look at both numbers. And you pick the appropriate one. You can pretty quickly, if you've done this for years, you can tell when you need to use one versus the other. Midpoints are adjusted annually, but your market check is only biannually. So you don't need to go out and spend the time and energy to do a market check and redo everything and rerun all of your regression formulas. You don't have to do that every year. You do it once every other year. You don't want to wait more than 3 years, because then all of a sudden you got huge changes and everybody gets all testy with you. But each year you are going to make a move on your midpoints relative to how far the market moved. So the question is, well, how do we know how far the market moved if we don't do a market check? Salary study companies check it all the time. They survey organizations. How much was the average increase given, or what were the range of increases given, actual increases given, not budgeted, over the previous year? And we answer those regularly. So we know. They have that data as well. So your midpoints can be adjusted based on that information. Please note, COLA is built into the market adjustment already. It's not a separate thing. So we don't have COLA and then a raise. It's all together. So the raises may look bigger, but it's because COLA is already built into it. Does that make sense? So we don't have to do two. It's just one. Okay. The target pay that you defined, or that Greg decided was best, was between 96 and 104% of midpoint. And you want that because some people are going to be rock stars and they're going to go above market, and they should be paid above market slightly. And then there are others that are moving their way in. They're new to the role. They shouldn't be necessarily fully at market, or higher, certainly higher than market, right? Your increases are based on your performance. In your case, the pool of increases or bonuses would be determined by the success and what's been going on at Shakopee as an organization. And then how you distribute that is however you distribute it. We haven't redesigned any of that. But to be eligible to even get a bonus is based on your individual performance. So you could be eligible, I'm exaggerating for effect, for a 20% bonus as a customer service rep, right? But if your performance as an individual wasn't sufficiently high, you don't get it. You don't get to participate. So it's sort of a entry point. All right, so here are the grade levels that were assigned to each job within this organization and how they rank from bottom to top. Notice we don't have apprentices in there. Apprentices are always one grade lower than the journey level, because it's an entry level. They're sort of a training role. So rather than saying, well, we'll keep them really near the bottom of the salary range, we just said, we'll just put them one grade below. And since they're apprentices for more than just a very short period of time, they'll get a raise, just like anybody else, based on their performance at that level. It's just their level's one grade lower than a journeyman, both in water and in electric. This was, if anybody's interested, this was the data points for the market. Weighted averages. Okay. Then we have 2021 midpoints. Notice that the top would be Greg, because you have to have one for him. We don't do job evaluation points on the general manager. So there's 14 grade levels, and then there's the top one, right? Notice that his midpoint is not 215, it's 190. It's 100, well, it's whatever 94 is. Do the math, right? I can't make the translation, but it's lower. All right, same merit grid that we looked through. Greg and I duked it out and did some math and figured out where everybody lands. That's it. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to comment just a little bit on our merit grid. We do, when we looked at this, we do have some employees that are above the 120%, and our philosophy would be that that they would be, their base pay would be frozen until they get into that under that 120%. Not to say that there might not be a flat increase but their base pay would stay the same. So we have, I think there was 5 total. I'd have to look at the numbers. I think there was 5 total that
Wasn't very many.
were above that 120 with this. So we are definitely going to have to do some adjustments, but I think we would do it on number of years of service, right? So over time, that would get back within that pay grade that they're at. So not an easy discussion to have, but there's some discussions that we have to have with some of our employees to get them in that pay range. There really isn't. I think there was one position that was in the low 80s, but overall, it was, in the mid 80s to, 100 and, 100. There was a few over 112, but those were scattered out as well. So, so there's some work we have to do to get this laid in there, but I think the process that we went through and what we're trying to accomplish is the pay grades. We understand there's a salary cap. We understand that some of these positions at 120% would be over salary cap. We understand that we can't pay over salary cap unless the commission would decide to take action and try to get an exemption or something like that. So we completely understand that, but we just wanted to say, hey, this is what the market is with comp analysts and where these positions landed. So that's why the decision was made to present it this way. And really we'll stand for questions, but overall, it was an exercise I think that needed to be done, that was overdue, and this is the end game, and now we need to, after it is approved or some direction from the commission, then we'll have some meetings internally and really put this into the 2022 budget year.
All right, any questions for Deb or the committee?
I have questions for the committee. I know that Kathy and Justin were on the committee. I'm just trying to find out if you've learned anything else, more detail, or did you watch this same presentation, or was there more information that was provided to you? And yeah, and what your thought was on it, and what your thought was on the presentation, and was there any surprises, and was there anything? I guess surprises is the best.
Okay. There wasn't much difference. Actually, the presentation we got was the one that was in the packet versus the one she just gave here. So there wasn't much difference in the information that was presented to us. I know one of the conversations we had, which we didn't talk about, we were talking about the 4 or 5 individuals that were redlined. I thought we talked about how many years it would take to get them in line. It was only like 2 or 3, correct?
Yeah,
it wasn't like a huge, that was the only other thing I was going to add, because we talked about that a little bit. And let's see. I was thinking about anything else when I was going through this. Did you have anything else to add, Justin?
On the red line employees, I think we talked about that some might be close to retirement age,
Yes.
and so they may leave before they become in line, but makes it less of an issue.
Yeah.
I would also, maybe she can answer this. I was thinking about it with the salary cap, and the employees going over, how we kind of get to the market rate being above the cap, which would imply either that we've got a lot of non-profit, or we have a lot of for-profit type companies that aren't subject to the cap, right, in our comparisons, or other places are seeking exemptions that will go around the cap, right? So
Right.
it'd be interesting to know kind of what that is that's allowing kind of that range to go over the cap.
And I'll comment, I do know that, like Rochester Utilities, they're, the largest municipal utility in the state. They do have a cap, an exemption. So I think the city and the utility went together on that, from what I've understood. I think Larry Koshier had went through that when he was here, and we talked about that a little bit. So, that's the big one. There's definitely on this, there's definitely lots of co-ops and, investor-owned in these salaries. There's no doubt about that. But I also think that that's who we compete against as well. I think since I've been here 5 years, we've lost 3 employees to Xcel Energy. We've lost 1 employee to Minnesota Valley Electric, and we lost an engineer that they just paid a little more to another utility just down the road. So, so those are some of the things that we do compete against, and even in the last 5 years. So, but definitely the reason that they go up is because in these surveys, there is some co-ops and investor-owned, and their VPs and some of that they classify as VPs do make more than what we pay.
Right. I think one of the things that stuck out for me when we were going through it was that it's not just the general manager position that's hitting the cap, right? Within that salary range, down a couple levels, you can still hit the cap.
Yeah, at 120%, yeah.
120%, yeah.
120%, yeah.
You know, I feel like that's something we just have to keep an eye on and be aware of, that, you know, maybe it's something the state needs to take care of, but something we're gonna have to manage for now.
Yeah, and I think that the state has looked at it. There has been bills that have been put in front. They haven't gone to a strict vote yet. So our utility association is working on that every year, is looking at that and trying to get that passed, as well as if the utility desires at some time, you can ask for, utility can ask for an exemption for just themselves. Like I say, Rochester has done it. There is other ways that people pay some of their employees, you know, that.
Which are legal.
Yeah, yep, which are legal. Yep, they do some retirement stuff. You can get some payouts, because that doesn't classify as salary until it's paid out. So, so there are some utilities that have done some of those things. So, would I just rather just deal with it? I mean, if we have to, we just, I think just take the initiative on and go after it, rather than trying to do some, like, hey, this is what you get at retirement. I mean, if it's the only way, I understand, but I think that it should be just discussed, and if the commission desires at some point, I think we should just figure out a way to make that happen.
And this conversation is happening on the city side as well. It's not like utilities are the only ones that this situation is unique to. But I think the situation in Rochester, the reason that we talked about it, at least at MMPA, was that reason that was put through was the city did it in partnership with the utility. And so that was part of why they succeeded, where others have not. And that was just a conversation we had there. But other than that, I mean, I think when, I want to kind of go back to the philosophy. I think it's different in mine than on yours. I'm sorry, not the philosophy, but yes, when we create this, whatever it is that we decide as a commission, I think the most important thing is thinking about not only what our competition is, but also thinking about loyalty isn't what it used to be. You know, we have a lot of long-term employees, but the younger generation just is not going to stay somewhere for 40 years. They are going to bounce around, and they are going to always look for the better job. And so those are things, when we create this, we want to make sure if we're going to stay within market rate, that that's something we do going forward. And we don't kind of backtrack and say, well, we want to pay 10% under market. Then we're just training people to go work for somebody else. That's what we're going to end up doing. So that was just my only input about having this philosophy.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing is pay for performance. I think that's gonna be a
Yes.
shift for us next year. I mean, I can't get everything done in 1 year. We've gotten a lot done this year. But, you know, next year, when we actually have a tool that we can coach our leadership team and our employees, that it matters on what we're accomplishing. I think that's gonna be a big shift for the organization, that we are performance-based driven and that we want people to be highly motivated and very successful. But then, you know, we're gonna pay people, but we expect that a lot out of our people as well.
Yes. Any other comments or questions for Deb or the committee?
Is that pay for performance common amongst utilities, others? Is that, it doesn't strike me as an industry where those bonuses align as well as someone that, as the corporate structure, I guess, so is that common among utilities to have that?
So there's two parts to that question. Bonuses are not necessarily part of pay for performance, but bonuses in the co-op world, for example, are uncommon. They don't do incentive pay. They put it all in base. So, but pay for performance is more common. The only places where I find it to be uncommon, and that's changing a little bit, is when in a union environment. But pay for performance, you know, unfortunately for all of us, Excel is a client, and they have pay for performance, and it's core to who they are. They also have incentives, but, you know, having been down that road with unions and tried to put in pay for performance within the union, as long as it is your performance evaluations are accurate and fair, and there's review levels, the union doesn't mind that. I have not had people fight me on it, but it has to sort of be the whole package. You can't just say, we're just now gonna pay for performance, and there's no longer the step system, which is what union pay has been based on over the years. But in the utility world, I'm not, you know, pay for performance in the non-union jobs is not uncommon. It's more the norm, yeah.
And I will comment, and that the bonus part of it does, you know, is a little foreign. I mean, I think the flat amount is a little more credible, where we're trying to, you know, redline somebody or give somebody a flat amount versus a percentage. So I would say it's a little less common in the utility sector to have a bonus, because, you know, where's your guidelines on how much you make versus rates and how successful you are. So I would say in the utility sector, it's a little less common on the bonus side of things, but I really like the pay for performance grid function that we have here and the percentages in there.
Any other comments or questions? So I think in form of a motion, we are looking to adopt the total compensation. I always think of it as policy, but philosophy, is that what we're looking for, Deb? And so if anybody would like to make that motion. And let us know if you need help making that motion, like what you want.
I would like to motion to accept, embrace, and enact the compensation plan as so outlined.
All right, I have a
Second.
motion and a second. Is there any comments or questions on the motion?
I just have one comment. When I get a package of information, I need more information than just a PowerPoint. So, I mean, I think the discussion was really good, and I think the information was really good, but for next time, I would need more detailed information instead of just a PowerPoint.
Is there any details that you're still looking for?
Well, I think that the majority of the information was discussed tonight, and I can't think of anything, but I do need to read it and come up with a decision.
Yeah, that's duly noted, and we'll clean that up. When Deborah and I talked about this, we were discussing whether to have a full-blown one, and I thought it was important that we had dialogue. So we said, hey, let's not spend that extra money this time, but I understand what you're saying, and we'll clean that up and get it in more writing next time.
And I think with this piece too is there's things that are public and things that are private in regards to the things that we pay for. And so I think that was part of it. But if we could do the snapshot like we did tonight, that's maybe something that we can do going forward. Because printing too much information can very much confuse us as well without a guide to that. But very understood, Jody. So, all right. Have a
Madam
motion?
President, can I get who seconded the motion, please?
Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Ms. England, for your time and all your work. And I would say that the next part of this is the performance review process, because I think as we train the supervisors to understand how they're rating, it's going to be very much important to this process.
Thank you for your help.
So, all right, moving on to,
Ms.
yes.
Mokel, could we switch item number 7A and 7B? I'm kind of running out of time.
No, that's okay, Jody. I was wondering if you wanted to go through any other one. Is that all right with the body to move that? Okay. We're going to move on to 7B to do the copper and plastic water service piping before Ms. Brennan has to leave us. So, Mr. Schemmel.
Thank you. So we are not doing 6?
No, we're going to skip to 7B for
Oh,
now.
okay, understood. Thank you.
Sorry.
Let's see. So we're going copper. Okay. Staff was asked to look at the, pros and cons of plastic versus copper. There's a model over here that we brought in case there are any questions on, which parts of this we're looking at.
Lon, can you go over there and explain that?
Okay, so this is pretty much a typical service. This would represent the water main, curb stop that goes into the water main that the copper attaches to, the line that goes to roughly middle of the front yard. This is the curb stop. Then this pipe continues into the house, comes up through the basement floor, goes to your meter, valves either side of the meter, and then into the domestic plumbing of the house. So what is being discussed is going from the curb stop into the house with plastic. Staff is recommending that we stay metal from here to the curb stop so that we can locate it. In an emergency, which is usually why we're out there, we couldn't locate it if it was plastic. We have to hook on with a device that sends a current through a metallic conductor so that we can find these. When you're under 2-3 feet of snow, it's just not gonna happen if you don't have this. But, so, there are numbers in there from here to the house, which I believe is usually about 50 feet from the curb stop in. Any questions about the model for the typical installation?
I don't think so.
Okay, also, this is from the water main is ours, everything else is the customer's. All of this is inspected by the city building department when it goes in. The only thing that we do is before it's covered up, we make sure that this valve here is open. We call it sizzling, so you can hear that the service is running, because this part gets buried. You can't get to this again. It's right up against the water main, be under the street or sidewalk or whatever. So with that being said, it's obviously much more expensive to have the copper from the curb stop into the house. I guess, at this point, you know, if you've had a chance to look at these materials, I wonder if you have any questions for myself or?
Does anybody, yes, Mr. Dredd?
So, yeah, I think as we looked at this staff, I think this came up one other time, and I think Mr. Sewell from D.R. Horton is here as well. So if we have any questions on the developer side and the builder side, he said he would be willing to answer any questions. We talked on the phone today. Jody had given me this sheet on D.R. Horton side of things, on the builders, on kind of their viewpoint on why they think plastic is appropriate. Most of their communities do that. Us, when we talked internally, we think that copper has served this community well. We do think that it is an added cost to the developers. You know, we do understand that this is something that is owned by the homeowner as well. So that's why I know Jody had brought it back, and it has been policy in past practice that we have copper, and this is for consideration to go to plastic. I did talk to Mr. Sewell today about if we would consider plastic, we think it's appropriate that we put a locating wire in there, because then that is one way we can. We think that copper locates easier than the locate wire, but that's really not an effect that we're have a big problem with. So we think if the locate wire is in there so we can locate, we don't see many problems with this, and it is the homeowner's responsibility. So this is something that has to come back. We think this is a policy decision, and we've always just enforced our current policy, so now this is a new policy, and there are pros and cons with both of them. And obviously, we think copper is great, but not opposed to having plastic as well.
All right. Commissioner Brennan, since you have to leave, do you want to discuss your thoughts on this? Because you had a little more information than the rest of us.
Yep, and I went through the pros and cons that were included in our packet, and I also read the 2015 plumbing code this weekend. And in there, it states that the plastic has to have a tracer wire in there so that it is easily identified. And from the letter that we got from D.R. Horton, that the thawing, there's different techniques that can be used when thawing the plastic if it's necessary, other than using the welder tool. But I would like to hear from Mr. Sewell, if that would be okay.
Would be fine. Mr. Sewell, would you come and address? It's okay.
Mr. Sewell, will you sit at this chair, please? Thank you. Gets you on camera better.
Welcome. I think we quickly got to read your letter before the meeting, but if you have anything else to add, we would love to hear from you.
Mike Sewell with D.R. Horton. We're the developer and the builder out in Windermere we're on Marystown Road, County Road 15, south of the BHS building out there. Thank you. As Lon referenced, we've had many conversations between us and staff, and we always are talking back and forth on things that we think we can do better, or what they think or what they could do better, and what we think, or what they think we could do better. So we kind of go back and forth. But this one, it's not so much of a cost issue. It's just that we have gone back to seeing a rash of copper services ends getting stolen. Someone's going in there and digging out the last 10, 15 feet of our copper pipe that we stick out of the ground after we install it in the home. And then we have to go back through and make a connection somewhere underneath the ground and underneath the home. And a month ago, we had one of them leak, unfortunately, and it was on a one-level home. So we had to move the people out and break open the floor and dig down 7 feet to get to it, and it was quite the process. Lucky for the homeowner, it was still underneath our warranty, but somewhere down the road, it could be the homeowners, as Lon mentioned, that be responsible for it. So we're just trying to think of ways to solve that issue down the road. And one of the things is to go from plastic from the curb stop into the meter. It's done in 15 other cities that we build in right now. And I know it's in quite a few other cities that we're looking at the building coming year. So we just would like the Shakopee Public Utilities to consider that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Soul?
The one question, well, the nebulous concerns I have revolve around, like it says in here, the leaching of organic chemicals from plastic. Now, given that's beyond the main, it's not our concern technically, and the same plastics are used in the house, are they not?
Yes.
Yeah, so ultimately, it's one of those personal choice things, so I don't think it matters from our perspective what gets put in the ground if the customer ultimately owns everything from the curb back anyways.
And staff has mentioned the concern with leaching, because we've talked to them about other items and materials on other parts of the job, but we recognize their concern. But keep in mind that the plumbing code allows it. The AWWA, the American Water Works Association, has specs for materials, and the City Engineers Association allows it as material. So other bigger groups, national groups, have looked at this and have accepted different type of plastic for water main construction. So I know Lon had some percentages there. He's much wiser than I am on leaching, so I'll respect his, or he came up with the idea, but I just know the national boards out there have accepted plastic for water main material. And you're correct, it is in the house, that's all, we don't use copper anymore inside the home.
Yeah, so for our end, do we know why this became policy, or is it just one of those tried and true things we just never modernized?
Yeah, I think it's been, and Lon's been here longer than I have, but it's just been over time. This was, I mean, I think back in the day, there was some lead services, and they got rid of that, and copper was tried and true over the years, and we didn't have any problems with it, so we've kind of just stuck with, hey, this is what we've had for copper. So, Lon, you want to comment on that?
Well, just another thing that we're just kind of seeing, and I'm sure Mike's run into this, copper with flared connections, arguably probably the best you can put in, but we're seeing a lack of workmanship on installations. And the people that are doing these things, they don't have the talent anymore to do these. I mean, so it's harder and harder for them to be able to flare copper that doesn't leak or cause a pinhole later. So we've actually backed off on the flared connections. We're allowing compression, things like that. I mean, so it's kind of sad, but I think in the long run, it might be better for customers if we did allow, a plastic from the curb stop in, just because of the way that the things are going, I mean, would I consider plastic my home? Yes. I mean, I know what can happen and what might happen, but I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, at least my concerns is what might come out of plastic plumbing, but it's a concern as far as workmanship and skill levels, and we run into that on our recons where after one recon, there were 16 leaks because the workmanship just wasn't there. And, we just don't want to see that because that's a terrible inconvenience to our customers. We don't want to see that.
Mr. Creed, did you have a comment? or a
Yeah, I
question?
was just wondering if we have the equipment to thaw, because they mentioned steam in here and it's
Yeah.
said in here.
We do not. We have to hire that out.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're hiring it out again anyway, right?
Correct. And if it was from the curb stop in, that would be the homeowner's responsibility to get that. We do assist. A lot of times, even if the underground fault's on electric, it seems like we get tied in on the game because we want to make sure the homeowners have water and electricity and stuff. But, yeah, there are ways, and yes, we contract that out.
The other question I was gonna ask is, what part is being stolen? Is it just the vertical section from the 90?
What part of the copper
Yeah.
is being stolen?
Yeah, mainly.
Yes, because when we come out of the ground, we have to leave it up 6, 8 feet so the plumber can actually cut it off and put the meter on. So they're chopping that out and they're digging down a ways.
In this section, quite often they'll also leave a coil above ground. Well, that's gone. I mean, people see that, stick it up to cut it off.
Right.
Same people with the Sawzall, going under cars will do the same things.
Okay. That's what I was just wondering.
Okay. Any other questions?
I just had one comment. I know that Mr. Sewell stated that it's not necessarily the cost, but, if you take a look at housing and the affordability of housing nowadays, I think anything that is helpful, that has less detriment to our organization and is as a benefit to the community as a whole. So I think that it's a great opportunity for us to do what we can to look at the overall cost of housing and how much we can benefit the community by doing it. So I would like to make a motion to, do I have to make a motion? I guess you're looking for a motion.
Yeah, we are looking for a motion to approve the plastic water lines, so then we can put that in a policy, and then we are going to update this as part of our water policy manual, and then we will work with the developers as far as getting a spec for the tracer wire and how that connection is made to make sure that we can still locate that, so.
Okay. And, you know, I would like to see as we go along here, that our policies are always looked at with open eyes of making changes and making modernization or cost-effective changes in our policies. So I would like to make a motion to implement the plastic water service. And it looks like you will do that with the 2022 policy.
Yeah, so I think that if Mr. Sewell has a desire to do it right now versus 2022, I don't know where they're at in their building. We would work with them to get a spec out fairly quickly, but this will be incorporated in our 2022. But if a developer comes and talks to us, we're not gonna say, no, starts in 2022. We will work with our developers.
Thank you.
Okay, great. You got a motion? Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any comments or questions on the motion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Sewell, for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the general manager report, Mr. Drent.
I think we're on the water.
I think,
Do you want to go back to the
Well,
water?
I think we're going back to general manager, and then we'll get into water.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, perfect. So I just got a quick update here, and Denise, and then could you put that, on my slide up there? So we did have our second pilot meeting on 8/19. We are currently working on some numbers for that. So we will give you an update as soon as we get that. We are looking at a couple different options that we worked with, but overall, the meeting went well. We're just gonna be working with the finance team to get those numbers, and then Kathy and I will bring back something to this body fairly soon, we hope. We are working on our budget schedule right now. We had a small hiccup here, but we will get back on track, just to make sure everything is met. We're working on CIP stuff, that's due by the end of this week. And then we'll kind of dive into our budget with our cost of living and our benefits. So we got a subcommittee meeting scheduled for next week. We're diving deep into the budget right now. We do have County Road 83. We had some good meetings with the county on that. And we will bring back a modified agreement with the county. The county has agreed to that at our next meeting, and Kayla is working on that. Did have an MMPA meeting, so that was a couple weeks ago on a Tuesday. We did have a project engineer that we were able to hire, so that they start on next Monday, so that's exciting time for us. We working on health insurance renewal. We have our second meeting coming up on next Monday morning on that, so I think that it's been going well. Looking at a couple different options, and for that. We did get a thank you from the Grand Rapids Utility from us for the assistance that we gave to them, so we can pass that around. Just a little nice little thing that we'll hang up. And a thank you for us when we send the mutual aid crews there. So just a nice little thing that we'll hang up as a thank you, and that's what we do on a regular basis. If we have assistance needed, we'll do that. We did talk to SMSC about some watering, our water, and is there a possibility for future interconnections with them? So we will have other meetings with them, and hopefully at some point bring something back to you on that as an emergency interconnection type of deal. So I think it's just important that we continue to have those dialogues. Did have lunch with Bill Reynolds a couple weeks ago. Did have a nice service territory discussion with Ryan at MVEC, and I hope to continue that dialogue. Within the one of the next two meetings, we will probably have a closed meeting to have some discussions and get some direction from our commission on some negotiations. So we are moving along. but we are going to need some guidance from our commissioners. We've exchanged maps and different things that we're working on, but now the next step is getting some direction from our commissioners. Met with CommScope about some potential, if there's ever load shedding policies that we have on the books. Could they shed load if we needed to? So we have those meetings from time to time. We really are struggling a little bit on material lead times, so just so everyone's aware, we are ordering stuff for next year's projects already, but there is some transformers that can get out the 40-week lead time, so it's really, they're having that backlog. So I've talked to Brad and then our purchasing people and Lon. We're in a meeting, and then Joe also with engineering on what do we need to do to make sure we're staying on top of materials. We have lots of materials here for this year and even in the beginning of next year, but really we're looking at mid-year next year. What do we need for materials, meters, and all that type of stuff? So we're staying on top of that. I am going to the chamber meeting next week with the city. There's a presentation, and Mr. Reynolds and I will be there for that, and I think Mayor Mars will be there. We haven't lost track of AMI, so we're definitely, as soon as we do the software implementation, AMI will start. We did, not 100% sure if it got sent out on Thursday or Friday. It was supposed to get out and sent on Thursday or Friday on RFP for software, but I will touch base with them, Jean, next week when she's back. The RFP is out for our auditing services. That was due today, so one of our next two meetings, we'll have those reports back. And then we just some quick pictures up here of our facility expansion. Obviously, you've seen it going up here. This is in back. They had some footings that needed to be done, so they had to. This is where we're moving the wall out. They dug that out, poured new footings, and then now today started moving walls. So they're having some. They had to re-pour the corner up there. They couldn't pour that until that was. Until the wall was moved, so they're getting that. This is some of the interior structure to hold up the roof that they have here. So this is what we have on the inside, holding up the existing roof as they take the panels away. This will be our new drive-up area coming through. This will be the exit, so that the people will come in through here into the drive-out, and then this turnaround is going away, and we're exiting everybody out this way here. So we're working on that stuff right now. Curb and gutter is scheduled pretty soon to go in. This is what it will look like on the drive-in, so we'll come here and go this way. This is where the drop box will be here, so you can either pull up with a car for the drop box, or there'll be a sidewalk here. We can park out here and walk up to this drop box and do the drop box in this area. And then we're looking at some signage out front as well, to guide people in the right directions. These footings are in, the block is coming, and they'll get moving on that. So again, this is just closing in the back and putting a drive up in. So we're excited about this project, and it's moving forward, and we're on schedule to be done before winter. So we're excited. You can see the crane got put in there. And then today, so this panel was set, and they got 5 or 6 panels moved today. So that's where we're at on the building expansion. Yeah, we're working on some CIP numbers for coming up. I know Ms. Brennan had asked a little bit about doing an analysis on where we're at on maybe on 2020 and budgets and how we our philosophy on that. So we're working on that. I put Sharon on that this morning, so we'll bring something back at a future meeting to talk about that analysis and what that looks like. And then the PCA Sharon is going to discuss during her report as well. So I know we had some discussion of that on some social media stuff, so we're going to talk about that during Sharon's report. With that, I will stand for any questions on the general manager's report.
Any questions for Mr. Durant?
Thank you very much.
Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Durant. All right, we'll move on back to number 7, water items and the water system operations report. Mr. Schemmel.
Thank you very much. Pumpage levels have returned to seasonal norms. We haven't hit 10 million gallons a day since August 20th. The last 7 days of August were actually 7 million gallons a day. So far in September, it's been 7.4. So with that, we have resumed flushing. just today. We're right over here in the Roundhouse area. Then we're going to be moving towards Southbridge and finish up that end of town. Our hydrant painting, they've gotten 50 hydrants done with 50 to go. Those areas, it's a little mixed up. It's sort of off of Veerling towards Mound and Sand. You can see where they are. It's on our website, which ones are getting done. And every year we try to do 100 hydrants. We're still looking for a better paint and process. Hydrants just aren't made out of good metal to take paint, so it can be kind of a challenge. A lot of cities don't even try. I mean, if you look at some other hydrants, they look pretty bad, structurally they're fine, but kind of an eyesore. Tomorrow, about 10 a.m., our PFAS sampling will start from the state's Department of Health. We didn't find out until like Friday, but kind of a surprise, they said that WCCO had an interest in coming as well. I don't think they're going to be here until 3 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But we're not expected to make statements or anything. The state is bringing an environmental engineer and their PR person, because I think this is kicking off a statewide sampling process, which is good to get done. And just what I learned today, even the sample takers, they want everybody to stay away from the sampling sites, but even the sample taker even has to list what antiperspirant he wore, because they're talking parts per trillion, and they don't want anything getting picked up from the environment or the air. They really want just what's in the water. So, I don't know, just don't wear any, I guess. But so that's kind of a point of interest. Tank 8, last week, they started painting the interior. It's still on schedule. They did move the significant completion back 1 month, so it's into November now, which is still fine to get it in operation. So we think that's going to happen in time. That's what I have for a report this evening, if there are any questions.
Are there any questions, Mr. Schimmel? Seeing none, we will move on to 7C, the water level comparison report. Mr. Schimmel.
Yes, kind of going back towards, the pumpages are now, at normal amounts for the rest of the season, I hope. I thought you'd like to see something other than my verbal, yeah, we're okay. There are some hard data points, that we do look at on a regular basis to know how we're doing. So what I put down is I graphed our static levels, and a static level is water level in a well when it's not being pumped. Those kind of tell you, what's the water level doing on a normal basis. In other words, if you hadn't been pumping it, versus when it was brand new, that kind of thing. And then also there's another measurement on here from the state that they call threshold levels. Those are kind of your drop dead points. So we do mark where the threshold levels are, and we do have those put into the SCADA system. So we get alarms should we even get close to that point. We're actually thinking about a little advanced control where, since our motors are all in VFDs, if we got too close to a threshold level, the VFD could just slow the pump down. We have yet to, that's kind of a next year wish list that we want to get into programming. But as you can see, the levels really haven't moved that much. What I'd like to propose also is that, say, January or February of next year, that I graph the entire year and compare it with prior years so that you can see how it looks. I think that would be of interest, and a little more data. Another thing Greg had mentioned, we met with the Sioux community. They just did a water aging study or testing, and their water is roughly 40 years old from the time that it had hit the ground, gone down, and been pumped out. And Greg asked that we look at that. So we contacted the U.S. Geological Survey, who does that kind of testing. We don't have any information yet. We're going to find out how much it costs. And I know it can take months to get results because they have to wait until they get a minimum number to even run, because it isn't requested very often. But we're gonna see what that looks like, because ours should be very similar to theirs. We're pretty much in the same aquifer, in the same area. But I think that would be of interest. Are there any questions as to the graphing or the levels or anything like that.
Any questions for Mr. Schimmel? I believe that would be fun to see and to have the more data. I think we enjoy seeing some of that we don't get to see every day. So.
Right, understood.
Yeah, no, and I, it almost blew me away when they were talking about it, that, you think about something that's happening today and 30 to 40 years from now is when we're actually using the water. And it's just like, to me, it's just crazy numbers, right? You're like, okay, so if we have a drought today, well then if next year we have an abundance of rain, it probably levels out over time. So it's good that we have, the water quality that we have, and that we can go down into the ground and get it, and we're not relying on surface water, which to me, that's the big difference, so. But we won't know until the actual test comes back, so.
Okay. If that's everything, thank
That's
you,
all that I
Mr.
have.
Schimmel.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. All right, we're going to move on to number 8, which is the electric items update. Mr. Carlson.
Good evening, thank you. We have 15 outages since our last meet. Sounds like a lot, but all these are like onesie, twosie customer outages, which is good. You could have one large outage, which could take a lot of time out. So we have on the 4th with Madison Monroe, we had some failed equipment cut out that fell apart. 3 animal-related outages totaling about 108 minutes. St. Francis Hospital, they were testing their generator and tripped one of their fuses in the transformer. On-call staff assisted them to get that back up and running. Late August, we had a total of 5 outages related to storms. And Pike Lake Road line fuse opened. That was right around the time of the storms. And then on 31st, we had a feeder go down on the south side of town. 153 customers affected for 42 minutes, which is very fast response time. Project updates, Henches Way, Stagecoach Road, undergrounding electric lines have been completed. Street lighting, everything's completed out there. It was a fast project. Greystone headquarters, they added another service to their existing. They have a tenant coming in, they needed a 480 volt service. Downtown alley recon, street light poles have been installed. The Levy Drive Duck Bank, Phase 1, which is east of Fuller on Levy. That first phase has been completed. Our contractor, Casser John, is installing a duck bank for us. Phase 2 is going through with the city street project for that Shakopee Flats addition development down there. 901 Canterbury Distribution Center, which would be the old Kmart Distribution Center. They're adding in service at that facility. Borings have been completed and crews are on their way to start that project. And then last but not least, Windermere 4th edition is starting this Thursday for the joint trench. And that completes my report. Any questions?
Are there any questions for Mr. Carlson? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will move on to 8B, which is our electric vehicle charging stations. Mr. Carlson, back to you.
So a little background, Shakopee Utilities is working together with the city of Shakopee to provide electric vehicle charging stations for the citizens of Shakopee. SBU will purchase a total of 6 charging stations totaling $57,429.80. This includes the purchase price of a 5-year data and maintenance plan. The charging stations will be equipped with both an app base and credit card payment options. We received additional discounts from NLX for the unintentional delays in availability for the charging units, which I think was about a 30% discount. Direct sales from the manufacturer will make these chargers less expensive than the state bid contracts. SPU will backbill the city of Shakopee for the cost of 3 units totaling $27,384.90. Shakopee Utilities will have an additional cost for infrastructure needs at each location. SPU does and will provide at no cost to the city, but hiring an electrician for the hookup and will bill the city for the chargers at the community center at Second Avenue parking lot. Both the City of Shakopee and Shakopee Utilities have chosen and approved the locations. Locations of the 6 units will exist at the Southbridge Dog Park, Lions Park, Shakopee Community Center, Shakopee Public Works Building, and 2 units located at the 24-hour lot at Second Avenue and Lewis Street. We're looking for action to approve the quote from an LX in the amount of $57,429.80 and additional costs incurred by local licensed electricians for final commissioning of the 6 units.
Right, are there any questions of Mr. Carlson first?
Can I comment
Oh,
just a
yes,
little bit?
Mr.
Yeah,
Grant.
the only thing I would like to add is that these are the same style of chargers that MMPA, our power supplier, is having, and they are going to do the monthly billing. So we've worked with them, and they're going to bill just like the other ones. It happens, pretty automatically, so it's not an extra fee that we're going to incur from MMPA, and then we will see a credit on our power bill is what I would guess is that philosophy, and then we'll be able to balance it out that way. But we don't have an additional staff to build this out. This will happen behind the scenes with our power supplier. We thought that was also a reason to go with this brand. Otherwise, we have to have a separate contract to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you for the additional information. All right. If there are no questions, I will take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the quote from NLX for $57,429.80 and the additional costs incurred by the electricians for the 6 units.
All right, a second, Mr. Creed. I have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Carlson. We will move on now. We added 9A to Human Resources to talk about COVID. I think with the change that's been happening kind of rapidly with the Delta variant, I know there's been some questions and concerns. Mr. Krieg had brought some up today to me and Mr. Drent, and so we thought this was a good opportunity to start discussing that, what is going to happen if a few of these unknowns happen. And I think part of it is because there is no, governor's order at this point, we are kind of on our own and making some of these decisions. And so we'd like to have some kind of decision. And I know I also asked Kayla, because one of the conversations was around the public meeting. And again, with that governor's order expiring, I'm not sure if our meetings are affected by that, if we can go back at any time or what that all entails. And so I don't know where we want to start. Mr. Durant, do you want to maybe take the lead on this?
Yeah, well, again, I think that this is appropriate that we have this. I think for tonight, I would like to have some dialogue about this and then really bring this back at a future meeting for, hey, this is kind of what direction we're going to want to go. So I did reach out also to Kayla, and I guess the first thing we should probably have a discussion at is about our commission meetings, and then we will go into some of the other stuff that we want to talk about. So Kayla, can you elaborate a little bit on commission meetings and whether we could be a remote, or right now do we have to be in person?
Madam President, Commissioners, good evening. First of all, let me be sure that you can hear me okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Wonderful. As President Mokel noted, of course, the governor's emergency order expired as of July 1st. And so we are no longer operating under the framework of that general emergency power. So we're back to the regular rules of open meetings, if you will, which generally require a meeting to be held in person. However, there's a statute 13D .02 that allows for commissioners or governing board members to participate through interactive technology. And the legislature made some tweaks to that statute just this most recent session. But there are some requirements that include at least one member of the governing body must be physically at the location. You need to provide notice of where commissioners are participating from remotely, if that makes sense. In other words, an address. And that address that is listed in the notice must be open and available to the public with some pretty narrow exceptions. And so an example of what I have seen is that if there's a member of our governing body who is out of town for a conference or something, then perhaps the hotel conference room is listed under that address by way of example. In addition, in the minutes, there must be a reason provided as to why that member of the governing body was not there in person. And there are some other criteria that must be met, including that all of the commissioners can hear and see all of what transpires in the meeting, essentially. We're all kind of used to that after going through the pandemic, but there are some requirements in the statute nonetheless. So let me say that that exists under the current law, not under any kind of an emergency framework. In addition, the same statute that was relied upon by many governing bodies, 13D.021, specifically does address a pandemic, and it discusses the ability of the presiding officer, the chief legal authority, or the chief administrative officer to make a determination, and this is the key, as to whether or not it is practical or prudent under a health pandemic to meet in person. And the League of Minnesota Cities' view of this, does this mean an individual governing body can decide to not have a meeting in person, is maybe. So there is at least a question from the league's point of view as to whether or not an individual commission is able to do that, absent some finding such as we had with the governor in the emergency order. So let me stop and see if there are questions.
All right, are there any questions on the meetings?
My first question is, these are laws, yes, but aren't they largely just merely formalities, not really a huge issue unless someone formally complains? So it would require, like, if we all met at Zoom, well, these commissioners didn't list their home address and wouldn't let me in. They're breaking the law, I'm filing a complaint. Or would we need to look at meeting at a library or something like that? Which is still in public and then thus defeats the point.
Right. I mean, the statute does allow for a complaint process under the open meeting law, so a complaint can be filed at court. You're right. Certainly, we try to follow best practices and comply with the open meeting laws. So the requirements, I just noticed some of the high-level ones, if you will. But as a practical matter, it is possible to attend remotely. You just have to satisfy those requirements of the statute.
You mentioned there were some exclusions for what had to be disclosed. Do those include personal residences, or what do those entail?
Yeah, good question. Those include if you're doing military service, so obviously that's not going to be open to the public, or let me find the exact language. The member has been advised by a healthcare professional against being in a public place for personal or family medical reasons. Having said that, the statute goes on to say, this clause only applies when a state of emergency has been declared under section 12.31, and it expires 30 days after the removal of the state of emergency. So it's a pretty narrow exception. The other thing I would note is that, and those two reasons I just ticked through quickly, military service or advice by a healthcare professional during the course of a health emergency may only be used for a limited number of times per year. And that is what allows the meeting not to be, the remote meeting location, I should say, not to be open to the public. So it's pretty narrow.
Any other questions? I have one question, is who is to declare the pandemic for that piece of it? Because isn't there a process for the declaration to fall into before that could actually kick in as a rule?
That's a good question, President Mokel, and I think perhaps that's why the League of Minnesota Cities is being cautious and saying, well, it's maybe. And I'm not aware of any individual community that has made that determination absent a general proclamation by the governor. But the statute nonetheless does say that those individuals may make a determination as to whether or not it's practical or prudent to hold an in-person meeting.
Okay. Any comments or questions on that? All right, do we want to move on?
Sure, we can, I would, yeah, no,
No, I mean, move on to the next step.
Right, yes.
Yeah, we had 6, correct?
Yes, there-
Okay, just so
so-
everybody knows.
Yeah, so there was some other discussions about masking. So what is our current policy? Our current policy is we follow CDC guidelines, so we don't require it currently. If someone wants it, we provide them with a mask, but we currently don't require it. We have a sign since we opened out front that if you're not vaccinated, you should have a mask on. But we don't check anybody or we don't require that. So that is masking, and what we have followed so far is the CDC guidelines.
Just to comment on that, the current health department guidelines from the state recommend that vaccinated and unvaccinated people wear masks when inside a business. That's the current guidelines from the state.
But unfortunately, businesses most of the time follow the CDC guidelines, which is also then addressed through OSHA. And so there's always that fine line of the state, the CDC, and then you have OSHA. Do you want to make any clarifications on that, Kayla? This is
I
always a
think-
fun one, so.
It is. And of course, we don't have any statewide requirements. Some communities have some local requirements. I'm not aware of any called for by the city of Shakopee at this point in time.
There's not.
And it is true that there are recommendations as to wearing masks regardless of vaccination status, indoors or not. And so it seems to me that the commission may consider whether it wants to do something other than what it is requiring right now, which is requesting that those who enter the building in the public lobby wear a mask if they have not been vaccinated. I suppose the commission could consider more stringent alternatives if it desires. But the complicating factor is, as noted, we don't have a statewide requirement, we don't have a local requirement, so we would be acting to control our own premises.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions on the masking?
And I
Comments?
will, I did talk to Mr. Reynolds today about this a little bit, and ask him, and he said, currently they are not. We, just like us, they watch the numbers every day, and if there is a significant change, they are, poised to make that decision. So he said that if they are gonna make that choice, he would definitely give me a call. Or this body can choose whatever it chooses. But I just want you to know that we are in contact with the city about this as well, and some of those. And I'm also on the website that shows all the cases, and try to keep up on that as well.
Okay, so let's move on to number 3.
Remote working. As of May 10th, all SPU employees are back in the office, with some exceptions. We take the same viewpoint as, the CDC, and we had an option for all of our employees to get vaccinated. They all had a choice to do that. So we're back in the office. I will say that we are, we could go remotely with some of our employees. There is going to be some challenges on coverages of our front office in some of those positions like that. We have had a couple of employees that have had close contacts, and we have had them work remotely after a close contact. And then with a negative COVID test, they came back after the 5 days with no symptoms. So if somebody does have a close contact, we currently had one today that a husband has COVID. So we got the equipment to them, and they're going to work remotely, and that'll be for 14 days because there is one in the family. So we do keep and monitor this on a regular basis. All our employees know it. If they have a close contact, they need to talk to us. If they have an exposure in the house, they need to contact us before coming in. And we had one other one that was vaccinated a while ago that was a potential with somebody that we had them mask up for the 3 to 5 days with a negative test. So we do follow those guidelines. If cases get worse and we want to close some of the front offices, again, or have limited schedule on when we're open, I think then we could go back to working a little more remotely. Where coverages on Wednesdays open later, and some of those, we do get some staggered start times, so it is a little challenging, but if we do decide to have limited hours because the outbreaks are worse, I think then we could definitely consider doing some remote working again. So we're set up for it. We're ready for it. So if we think that this is a pandemic is definitely surging, we want to work remotely, we can do that. So we've taken some precautions and we'll continue to evolve as we work through that. So.
I don't know that we ever talked about this, but do we have any positions that cannot work from home?
Yeah. So all of our operators, our linemen come in. We currently we have the break room opened up, but when the pandemic was last year and we had the emergency powers, we divided off our break room. We had split shifts, what time they had start times, rotating, and different things like that. So we didn't have that, but since we've been back, we've kept our social distance. We try to keep our social distance of 6 feet, so we left our partition open, and we're definitely more spread out than we are, but we don't stagger our start times like we did before. So I would call, some of our water operators have to be here. They have to do rounds, take tests, do different things. We can go to a skeleton crew if we have to. Electric, kind of the same thing. We have to be here to do that work. Our engineer techs can work remotely and have worked remotely. The directors could work remotely if need be, if we think that's appropriate. Finance has done rotating shifts, some in, some out, doing that stuff. They can do most things remotely, and then our customer service up front has run different people in the office and working remotely and can answer phones remotely and do all that stuff. So just want to make sure I'm not forgetting. IT, they can work remotely as best they can, but there usually was one always in-house as well. So that's kind of where that's at.
And then with those individuals, how do you handle the quarantine situation since they cannot work from home? How do you handle the ability to, is it required PTO sick time?
So what we did in past when the pandemic started, we just paid the people. We did not require them to do that in the past. When we required that they stay home, we just paid them for that time.
Okay.
If we go into, but we were also, at the time there was some reimbursable expenses that were able to come out of this. I don't know if we technically could, but there was some 80 hours that we had people rotating. So, so we currently, when we said stay home because of the pandemic, we've paid them. So if we need to change that, then that would be a decision that the commissioners would make.
Any other questions for Mr. Drott? All right, we'll move on to number 4.
Sure.
Oh, Sharon, sorry.
No, that was fine. I was just going to add, so we did cross-training, so more functions couldn't be done at home, such as payment processing. So if someone was, had to be out in quarantine, I would have other staff that could be cross-trained and come in and perform it. So only the phones are the ones that really were working from home.
Okay.
Testing and reporting, I think we covered most of that, right? So if somebody is, sick or anything, we stay home, get tested. If you had an exposure, stay home, get tested, working remotely and stuff like that. So per CDC guidelines and what we've done so far.
Okay.
Exposure and quarantine. So again, if fully vaccinated, somebody has a close encounter, 3 to 5 days, negative test. Wear mask inside for those days. Isolate. If you test positive, you need the 10 days if you're quarantined. If you're not vaccinated, you need the 14 days. Anyone with symptoms must get tested immediately. 14 days really is if you haven't been vaccinated, if you have a close exposure or somebody in the house has it. So that's what we've been following so far. Again, I don't think we brought a written policy back on these things, but this is what we have been doing and following, so you're aware of that. And I can send this out as well, just so everybody can see. If you have questions, we can, sure, email me on that. So, and then the mandate on the vaccine, you've heard certain companies that have required it. We currently offered it. We're back in April from the Mid-Wacaton Fire Department had this in conjunction with the city. So the city was able to hook us up with that. Mr. Reynolds helped us get on that list, and we offered it to every one of our employees. We haven't yet required for people to tell us if they've been vaccinated or not. Besides, we just offered it, and there was time slots that they went online and got signed up. We did not, record, monitor, let us know if you've been vaccinated. We have not done any of that. So we currently let people know if they haven't been vaccinated, and these are the guidelines. If you have been vaccinated, these are your guidelines. So we currently don't have a list. These people have been, and these people have not.
Okay. Any other?
Madam President and
Oh, yes.
Commissioners, maybe I could just add, for some perspective from the League of Minnesota Cities, the majority of communities have not elected to require vaccinations and instead have taken the position of encouraging it. And from the League's perspective, some of the reasons behind that include potential employer liability if you require your employee to be vaccinated and there's some kind of an adverse reaction. And also being mindful if you do decide to require vaccinations, you've got to be very careful as to federal disabilities laws and civil rights laws. So that all has to be considered as part of the policy drafting. So I just wanted to share what the League is reporting it is seeing in its cities.
Yes, and any adverse reaction is required to go to, be reported under OSHA as well, since it's required. All right.
So those were the main things, the main topics that I wanted to discuss a little bit. I'd be more than happy to bring stuff back and additional information if you wanted, or if we see a change or the city makes a change, I'd definitely keep the commissioners abreast on what's going on. But if we really want to bring back some formal policies, I'd be more than happy to work on them over the next couple meetings.
Okay. Here's my thought, since Jody is not here, is that we do kind of, we send this out to all the commissioners, and then each commissioner can send it back to you and Denise, and we can compile thoughts, questions, maybe things we want more detail in or more into a policy at the next commission meeting. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing to kind of think about, just in terms of like risk, is if there was an outbreak amongst the electric crews and they were all out at the same time, right? I assume that they interact regularly with each other. So there being an outbreak amongst them, right, is something that could happen.
Yep. Department-wide.
Department-wide, right? There's reports of like, auto repair shops having to close because all of their people are sick, right? Especially in the South, right, where the outbreaks are higher. So, as a general thing, like that's a thing of concern, right? That we wouldn't be able to respond to power outages, right? So.
How did we handle that last year? What was our plan for that last year if that were to happen?
Yes, so last year we split the crews up and we took breaks at
That
different
helped.
times and really, I think, mitigated on that. I will comment that I guess if we had that, not to say a storm couldn't come through, we do have mutual aid, we do have Chaska, which we have good relationship with, we got a good mapping system. As much as it would be different for me to do it, but Mr. Carlson and I both are licensed journeyman linemen. If we had an outage and we absolutely had to, where we had a pandemic, we would get the lights back on. I mean, just because, I know we can do it. We meet the requirements. We have some people in our upper management that we're blessed with having that type of, hey, we can still do this. But I do agree. I think we should, internally we'll have some more discussions on how can we mitigate that not everybody is together, right? So there's going to be some challenges there, but I think that, maybe not necessarily start times, but maintain distances, and maybe we make sure that we don't, it's been my goal to make sure that we intermingle with our staff, because we want to make sure that everybody, not that you get cliquey and you go with a certain person every time, and I've just tried to get away from that, but, you know, for these times, it might be that we do run kind of separate crews, and hey, you stay over here, we stay over here. Water, make sure we separate out enough that if we have an outbreak, that we can still do the proper reporting that we need to do.
Social distancing and where those meetings happen right around water.
Yes.
Unfortunately, you know, winter is coming, so you can't just, you know, meet outside, but.
Yep.
Yeah, the garage in the back's pretty big. There's a lot of airflow in there. Right.
No, there is.
Yeah.
I was gonna say you could, you just
Yeah.
had to put up a heater.
All right, so yeah, so I think we'll take some of that in consideration internally when we have some of our discussions at our managers meeting.
Okay,
And then I will definitely send this out tomorrow and just ask for comment on it.
yes, great, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Krieg, for thinking of it. It puts us on a better path to having answers before we need them. All right.
Thank you.
And with that, we will move on to, where are we at? 10A. The general reports, which is first is marketing, customer service, Ms. Walsh.
Thank you. The marketing has slowed down a little bit without Rhythm on the Rails. The next big event we'll have coming up is the Big Vehicle Fair, which is the early childhood education that's put on up at the high school. We'll have a presence there. We also just got an inquiry about having a Girl Scout troop come through. One of their sessions is on energy and conservation, so we'll host that tour for them. I've spent a fair amount of time since our last meeting updating our collection letters and billing statements to not only have the new logo, but to give it a new format and update that. You may have seen in your August billing, that was the first time we used the new envelopes with our logo and icons on the front. We're targeting trying to have the statements ready to go for the September bills, but there is a lot of, with the formatting, testing every single one of our rates and prior balances and kind of every scenario to make sure the formatting is right. So if all goes well, it'll be September. If not September, it should be October. We will be working on business cards next. Switching over to operations, we did disconnect in August after having skipped July due to the excessive heat. As a result of skipping a month, we had over 400 customers that were slotted to be up for disconnect in our regular disconnect process. We were only able to get through about half of that, just due to time constraints and the crews and how many people we can actually manage once they are disconnected. And again, because of how our process works, it's not like we can just keep continuing it into the days that follow. Once we actually bill, which typically happens maybe 3 to 4 days after disconnects, it becomes a total manual process because now the current bill becomes the current and the previous month becomes the past due, but really we're disconnecting for the prior month even. So it's just didn't work to get everyone disconnected that should have been. The special disconnects, we typically have one larger week out of the month that is considered special, and that's due to the people that were disconnected and then set up a payment plan. Their first payment's due a month later. The other 3 weeks out of the month, they have not been very large, and we've been able to handle those. Posting penalties, that was implemented in August, but because it is actually driven by part of our billing process, it was the August billing with payments due September 15th, that this will be the first time we actually apply penalties. And the 3-day grace period means that the 4th calendar day is when penalties will be applied. We did have an inquiry about Rent Help Minnesota. Ms. Brennan had questioned that. The answer is that we've had very, very few payments come in from Rent Help. It's just not really taken off. Some of what we are seeing is confusion between what should be utility payments and rent payments. I believe some of our money might be going to the landlord, and conversely, out of the few payments we've had, we also got a landlord's portion that came to us. So I think Rent Help is kind of working through a few things as well. The construction out front, as you've all seen, I just wanted to let you know that we do have a large reflective arrow that will be delivered tomorrow, and we will get that posted out there. Cold weather rule, believe it or not, we're coming up on that. The state has changed cold weather rule and expanded it to start October 1st and run through April 30th. Used to be the 15th of October through April 15th, so they've increased that a little bit. The other thing on my list was just high bill season. We have had an increased number of customer inquiries due to a combination of things, which would be just their increased electrical usage due to the heat. We've also had increased water usage due to the drought, and then a larger PCA in August. So I think the culmination of those three things has resulted in more questions about it. The larger PCA that was applied in August was the result of the July PCA revenue being understated, which then just made August's larger. It will return to normal with September, and it should be noted that all of this really averages out and balances out by year end. It's just really what month did it hit in, and depending on swings, like I said, in usage, both in water and electric and higher PCA, August just really kind of seemed to be like a high bill season. So, but we are in the process of doing a rate study, at which time the PCA and the philosophy behind that will also be addressed. So with that, that concludes my update. If anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Welsh? Seeing none, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right, we will move on to 10B, the water and electric projects. Mr. Adams, joining us from afar. Oh, that looks nice.
I love
That is,
I can't hear you.
That's not really where I am. I guess that's stuck on here from meeting during the week. How my image seems to freeze a little. I'm not sure it's useful. I'm going to share a screen. Should be more useful, I think. Let me know if that comes up.
yep.
Yep.
So this is the
Joe, will you make it
Core-
bigger,
yep.
please?
Make it bigger. Oops, that made it smaller. Let's see. Again, it goes off my screen if I do it any bigger. Is that good?
Hit the arrow over on the right to get rid of all the AutoCAD stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Let me get my view of you out of the way. Oh, there it is. Is that better?
A little bit.
Try and do one more adjustment there. Center it. Is that better then?
Yes,
Yes.
much better.
Okay. So this is our quarterly, and I have to apologize the commission. Oops. It's easier to use the arrows here. This was last done in January, so it's been 8 months since we've done our quarterly update. We've presenting this as one item rather than two separate under electric and water reports. But first we have the water list of projects that are ongoing. Again, these are lists of our own capital improvement projects for this year in 2021. Some may be carried over from 2020 and then begun in 2021. Then city, county, and developer projects that impact the electric or water utilities in different ways. And then we've mapped those also. So these are numbered for convenience to reference. We have over 50 projects and then another 10 CIP projects. And then we have the same with the electric. I'm going to scroll down for the viewing public. The map might be a little more helpful. Oops. that was not what I wanted to do. There's the map of the city with the projects highlighted. And if the commission has any questions about the water projects, I'm sorry, this, it's hard to do on a laptop. Seem to be all over the place here. There, that's better. So we list the projects in different categories, whether they've been completed. So that might mean the construction's all completed, but people are still building houses out there and occupying them. So the impact on our sales and our revenues and demands are increasing as the development fills in, or it's a building, commercial building that doesn't have full tenancy yet, things like that. But it's completed in the sense that the water mains and or service lines have been installed and services is possible for any of the demand that might be there from the development. And then we have those in construction that still haven't been completed. They have been moved into construction, but they're ongoing, and we're nearing the end of the construction season, but we do go now into November almost with construction in Shakopee. And then we have those that are in the design phase or they're on hold. So I would ask if the commission on the water projects has tried to update these. We even went around all the subdivisions to count up the number of empty lots. There aren't that many left to be more accurate on it, and looked at the number of accounts active in the apartment buildings. So this is a fairly accurate list. But if there are any specific projects on water that any commissioners have a question on, or if they want to point out if we're missing anything, I would appreciate that.
All right, any questions or comments on the water side? Doesn't look like any, Joe. Mr.
Okay.
Drent?
Yeah,
Greg would like to speak.
I just wanted to comment that, I think this was, we discussed, should this be a consent item? Should this be something that we have a discussion about? Again, we just want to make sure that we're being open and transparent, and this is what we got going on. And as you can see, it's, never a dull moment. There's just so much going on and so much development. So this is a good problem to have, and we take it on, each project on, and we, get it to completion. But I'd ask Mr. Adams to, really, future ones of these, we can probably put under consent. And if you have questions, we can definitely pull it off of consent. But we just think it's important that you're aware of all the development that is happening, and that's why I asked Mr. Adams to present this.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really indicative of the activity when you look at the map and see it's all over. It's on the east side, it's on the west side, it's in the central. A lot of activity obviously going on in the city right now. I'll move on to the electric list of projects, similar coding, whether completed or under construction, the type, whether it's residential or non-residential. And again, a lot of developments are filling in quite rapidly. So I'll show the map. Of course, we have our big CIP projects on there, some that have been completed or still in construction, some in design being shorthanded. We haven't got as much progress on some of these as I would have hoped, but the new filling the position of project engineer, or what we call now the engineering supervisor position, beginning Monday, is going to be a very, very big help, I believe. So if there are any commissioners with any questions on electric projects.
Any questions for the electric side? No, we look good here, Joe.
Okay, very good.
It's very much appreciated.
You bet, anytime. I'll stop sharing now so you can continue without my image here.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep, you bet.
All right, and with that, we'll move on for future agenda items. Is there anything that we want to look at for future items from the commission?
I want to see more of that beach and ocean.
I know, right? Let's go.
Yeah, just so you're aware, CIP is our next big one that Joe is working on, and I know that that's part of our budget cycle. We are got an email from the city today talking about CIP and what their CIP looks like. So we're in the middle of that. we're definitely gonna have the meetings with the city as well, and then, you know, that'll be a big one also coming up. And then the service territory, another one that will be coming up that's very important for us as an organization.
All right, thank you. All right, our next meeting is Monday, September 20th. And I did want to just mention Thursday night is the picnic at Greg's house. I would encourage you all to come, Commissioner Wise, for just even a short time. Say hi, say goodbye, just kidding. So, and I appreciate Mr. Drenton putting that on for the staff. And with that, if there are nothing else for the body, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn until our next meeting on what-
September 20th.
September 20th.
All right, I got a motion and a second. Mr. Krieg? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you, everyone. We did good for missing a meeting.
We did.